Welcome to HR Debatable. My name is Nelly Verlinden. I'm your host, and today I'm being joined once again by two fantastic guests, Daniela Mertens and Dr. Dieter Veldsman. Hi, Daniela, and hi, Dieter.
Hello.
Hi, Nelly. Lovely to be here with you.
Lovely to have both of you. Daniela, perhaps can you introduce yourself before we get started in a few words?
Certainly. Thank you very much. My name is Daniela Mertens. I'm based in Frankfurt and I'm responsible for human resource. I'm Global Director, People and Culture for a German company that does industrial automation and robotics.
Thank you. Dieter, perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about yourself as well.
So I'm the Chief HR Scientist at the Academy to Innovate HR, a very passionate HR professional that comes out of kind of the generalist HR domain, org design, organizational development. So really looking forward to our conversation.
I am too. Now, before we get started, let me quickly explain what we are going to do. In HR Debatable, as the name suggests, we debate about various HR and world of work related statements. I will give a little bit of context, read the statement, and then both Daniela and Dieter, you choose a position either in favor of or against. Of course, you will then get the opportunity to defend your position so that we have an actual debate. And I might play the devil's advocate every now and then to spark the debate a little further. Any questions?
All good.
Okay, then let's go. Our first topic today is around employee onboarding. Employee onboarding has gotten a lot more attention over the past years. Many organizations understand the importance of an effective onboarding process, and rightly so. Earlier this year, Fortune reported that 80% of new hires who receive poor onboarding plan to quit, especially if they are remote workers. But it turns out that getting your onboarding right isn't that simple. According to a 2023 onboarding survey report by GLEAN, 81% of new hires say they feel overwhelmed with information throughout the onboarding process. Information overload is a serious problem, as 81% say their company uses at least 6 apps or digital tools, and 33% use at least 11. As a result, people find that information is scattered in too many different locations. A lack of leadership or mentorship can make things even worse. 38% of new hires say they feel lost about who to turn to for answers. If we add to this the fact that on average it can cost companies up to 3 or sometimes 4 times the position's salary to hire a new employee, one can ask the question how much sense it makes to pour a lot of resources into recruiting new employees without first having your onboarding on point. And this brings me to our first statement of today. Without a well-structured onboarding process, a company's recruitment efforts are pointless. All right, Dieter, what do you say to that?
I'm going to go for the controversial one and I'll go against that particular statement and I'll share my view a little bit later.
Awesome. And Daniela, what do you vote?
I vote in favor for a well-structured onboarding process.
All right, very nice. We have some contradicting views here. I like that. All right, Dieter, I'm going to go back to you. So if you want to elaborate on that, go ahead.
So there's a couple of points for me here, right, that plays into it, which why I'm against that statement. And the first one is, I think the actual employee experience starts a lot earlier than that. And very often we find this disconnect for people between the experience that they had whilst being recruited. Then I get into the onboarding, and then regardless of what that experience looked like, it feels fragmented and it feels disconnected. So the point I almost want to make, and that's why I'm against this particular statement, is that I think we need to start thinking about employee experience a lot more holistically, even before somebody becomes an employee, so the candidate experience component. And then I think there's a lot of, it's like dating, right? There's a lot of goodwill that you need to build up during the course of that particular process. The onboarding needs to then accentuate what the real lived experience is going to look like within the organization. And I think there's various ways of doing that. I think your point that you make around, people becoming extremely overwhelmed, I think we just throw people with information the moment that they join a new organization. And we need to find a different way to stagger that over time, especially in an environment where we want people to get up and running, a little bit earlier. So I'm against the statement because I think it needs to start a lot earlier. I think onboarding needs to fit bigger into your employee experience as part of that. And I think it needs to be coherent in terms of how we deal with people along these different touch points.
Okay, thank you, Dieter. Nice opening. Daniela, please share your thoughts on this one as well.
Thank you very much, Dieter, to hear from your point of view. So my point is certainly that any kind of onboarding is truly helpful for the new hire. We know that talent for war is everywhere, and it is super crucial to ensure that the people we have, recruited so desperately and have secured them to come into the organization need to get very quickly into the culture and into the processes. So the earlier they are able to understand how the company works, what is the information, what is the policy, will help them to form an attachment, will help them to form loyalty, and also feeling, the skills and equipment to making contribution to the success of the company. So therefore, onboarding is very helpful. I have also seen that it's maybe mid-sized company and small-sized company, they don't have the resources, or they have a very small people and culture department, and they are very much left alone to organize this process for the new hires. And I have seen whenever you have an onboarding, it is truly appreciated and helpful to guide the new hire to the organization. So therefore, Dieter, sorry, I'm absolutely for it.
Nice one, and thank you both for this beautiful opening of our first statement here. Now, I have been thinking about this, of course, as well when I was preparing for this, and so one of the things that came to mind was, has technology in a way not made things a lot more complicated when, for instance, we talk about onboarding? And so what I mean by that is, we heard this already in the little intro that I gave. People say that they have to work with, I don't know how many different apps, or they actually said only 6, but others said 11 or more. So all this technology, all this digitalization, this automation that we have been doing also means that people who we hire, they need to get all this information and basically make it their own information so that they can start working with it. So has technology in a way not made things more complicated when we talk about onboarding? So Dieter, let me hear your thoughts on that.
I think, Neely, so technology is always going to be an enabler, right? And I think there's a couple of things to think about here specific to the onboarding process. I think if you've got a fragmented internal systems landscape so that onboarding has to run across 6 different, technologies and systems, that's a good preview of what the actual work experience is going to look like. So I think, that does not necessarily bode well. I think to get back to the employee experience part, I think technology is an important enabler within any process. And I think especially within onboarding, Daniela, here I'll agree with you that I think there's a lot of information that people need, and they need to find a way, I think, to navigate that, in a self-driven manner. So I think that is quite important. What I think it shouldn't do, besides the complexity that it's added, is to negate the human touch points that we also want to have during onboarding, because there is still, a component of connecting and feeling what it is like, etc. And I think, as much as tech can facilitate the process, I wouldn't like to think, and I know it happens in a lot of organizations, people join day one and they left to their own devices on the internal e-learning platform to go through a whole bunch of content. So I think they're a little bit not answering your question directly. I think it does complicate it. I think it can be fantastic if you do it well. My question would be, if I have to access 6 different systems just to get my onboarding done, that's probably going to be my life in the organization. So, when are you going to disappoint me in the process? So I don't know if that, that helps.
Thank you, Dieter. Daniela.
Yes, so technology is truly helpful to deal with the amount of activities human resource needs to handle. I have seen usually HR departments very thinly staffed. So having technology is truly, helping the HR professionals to enable activities. I'm fully agree with Dieter's point. It needs to be then from an employee perspective, having the right user experience. So if it's actually too complex to access it, is it have a number of different tools, then it's just irritates the users and the employees. So my recommendation is to have something what is enabling, but also very simple to use so that it can marry both sides, the workload from the HR department, but also the user experience for the new hire.
Yeah, and there was something else that I wanted to hear your thoughts on as well. I mean, if we talk about this and onboarding obviously has also become big business over the past years because we've got a lot of players in the market with all kinds of fantastic onboarding solutions. So it's become this big business as well. If we hear though these stats and people feeling overwhelmed and also people indeed feeling that they do not necessarily have the support from a manager or anybody in the organization, and if for 1 second we try to think about perhaps a simple solution that we could have for these kinds of issues. What would you think about if we just make sure that every new hire that starts in a company is just been coupled up, I'm going to say it like that, with a buddy? I know a lot of companies do this, but also a lot of companies don't do this, because if we make sure that everybody that joins gets a human being as their onboarding buddy, wouldn't that just solve a lot of issues? Because we would have the human touch, because they would definitely be part. And I know that there also exist solutions that actually can gauge who would be a good buddy for what person. They use analytics for it, but maybe that it gets a little bit more complicated. But we have the human touch, and we also have somebody that you can turn to with questions, and that hopefully can make the whole process a little bit more overwhelming. So wouldn't it just be as simple as that? What do we think of that as a solution? Daniela, I'm going to start with you this time.
Yes, I would definitely agree with this. This was definitely helpful to provide a buddy or a mentor to everyone who joins the organization.
Thank you. Dieter, any thoughts?
I think it's helpful. I wouldn't do it instead of some of the other components, because I think you're going to start struggling with consistency around what is it that we really want to land as part of the onboarding, because people will share from their, perspective and from their perception within the company. I think, and something Daniela said earlier, I think is really important around during onboarding, it should be less about the information we share and more about the connections we put in place for somebody to start actually understanding how to do their job. And I think the buddy can play a significant role there. I think, Neely, maybe also to comment, I sometimes think we drown people in information during the initial onboarding component, where maybe it is okay to take a step back and say, onboarding firstly, and a lot of the bigger companies have the benefit of being able to do this, that they almost onboard you during your first 12 months. It's not this 4-week, and then I almost, can't remember what I saw on day one. I know not all smaller companies are able to do that. But I think there is a step back that we need to say is, what is the important things to land during onboarding? If it is, I want to ingrain them into culture, then, maybe there's other things that's not as important, immediately to cover, and we can cover that slightly later. Agree with the buddy piece, because I think the human touch does come through, but I wouldn't only do that. I would do that as a complement to help people navigate, I think the bigger context.
Yeah, and if I may add something to Dieter's comment, it is crucial that somebody organize that setup and this framework. And here I sometimes see, because human resource or people on culture, they don't have enough resources to navigate it throughout the organization. And the local manager, they sometimes also not sure about it, because obviously their main responsibility is on another area. So there comes back to that really HR is given the right resources, that they can set up a framework for that they can be, the facilitator of such a body program. Otherwise, it will not be a sustainable process.
I think these are very valid points that you both are making. And while listening to you, I was thinking that, so I too have the feeling that what has happened now, because onboarding has become so much more popular over the past, probably 6-7 years, something like that. And so what we've seen is that organizations, I think with the best intentions, they have been adding things. Okay, yes, we should talk about that in our onboarding process. We should also include this. We should include that. So now we sometimes have these pretty heavy information-heavy onboarding programs that people go through. And so, but since this is still something relatively new, I think it could also perhaps be natural that we will see at some point that it's going to be trimmed down a little bit more, so that it's going to be more doable for new hires. I think, what do you think about that? That it's basically just like this natural evolution in a way. So there is this onboarding, there's the technology that comes, companies, they make really heavy, information heavy onboarding processes, and then it's going to start slimming down again because people can just not cope with all the information, and it's going to have a counterproductive effect at some point. Disa, what do you think?
I think we first need to acknowledge that employees have got different needs and they're also joining the organization at different times within their career, right? So I would almost say, I think as a starting point is first to go and segment your workforce around what the different onboarding needs are, because I've got a different need if I'm an experienced hire versus an executive versus somebody that is, this is literally my very first job. I've never signed in, to the office suite before. I'm exaggerating, but, I think if you segment your employee base, I think you've got a much better idea of tailoring what the mission critical onboarding should be for those different audiences. And then I think you have the ability to then cut through, what some of the content is that you don't necessarily have to utilize. So I think we will trim it down, but I think we will also get smarter in a way that makes information a lot more accessible for people over time. So it's not that, I have to show up because I've got one day full of presentations because that's, when I meet everyone. I think we will stagger, but according to a segmented type of approach. And I think that's a different way of thinking about that experience.
Yeah, to add to Dieter's comment, I think it's very important that the onboarding program and all the elements, they really add value to the employee, right? So it needs to be really thoughtful to think, okay, does it really add value to, what an employee needs to know, to have some common organization and knowledge? I'm a big fan that there is one session as a classroom session where you meet colleagues and peers who are also joining you, because there's a huge value in creating also friendships and companionships with other colleagues who are, just joining, and they also have the opportunity to ask all these questions you maybe don't want to ask your manager, but you feel, secure that, oh wow, somebody else has just started and has all these silly questions. So that's quite helpful. And I see overall onboarding as a really strategic HR tool. So it is important, but of course it needs to have a value added for the organization.
Okay, thank you both for this first fabulous debate.